on World News Tonight. Assassination attempt. Ukraine fails an attempt to assassinate Vladimir Putin in a drone strike, prompting possible Russian nuclear retaliation. Minister meet. Foreign ministers worldwide, including Russia, China and Pakistan, arrive in Goa for SCO summit. Give it back. South Africa demands the return of South African diamonds currently present in the crown jewels. Ride like a king. Londoners get an opportunity to ride around a South London park like royalty.
This is Other Derana World News Tonight. Reporting from Colombo, here is Sanuvi Mudanayaka.
Good evening and thank you for joining us on World News. Leading tonight is a potential attack on the Kremlin by Ukrainian drones in an attempt to assassinate Russian President Vladimir Putin. The attack took place in the cover of night at a time where the president was not in his seat. The Kremlin has stated that Russia reserves the right to retaliate anywhere and anytime it deems necessary in response to the drone attack on President Vladimir Putin's residence. The attack took place as Russia prepares for Victory Day celebrations on the 9th of May. The centerpiece of the commemoration of the victory against Nazi Germany and its allies in World War II is the annual military parade on Red Square, just outside the Kremlin walls.
Russia on Wednesday accused Ukraine of a failed attempt to assassinate President Vladimir Putin in a drone attack on the Kremlin and vowed revenge. Kyiv denied any role in the alleged strike. Video appears to show a flying object nearing the Kremlin's domed spires before exploding. Unable to verify the footage, the Kremlin said Russia reserved the right to retaliate, and Russian hardliners demanded swift retribution against Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. In a statement, the Kremlin said, quote, 2 unmanned aerial vehicles were aimed at the Kremlin as a result of timely actions taken by the military and special services with the use of radar warfare systems. The devices were put out of action. It said fragments of drones were scattered in the Kremlin grounds, but there were no injuries or damage. Putin himself was safe.
Why would they accuse Ukraine of this at this moment? It would be very interesting to hear your thoughts on this alleged attack.
At a news conference with leaders of Scandinavian nations in Helsinki on Wednesday, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky denied his country tried to kill the Russian president and suggested going after Putin was the job of an international court.
You know, I can repeat this message, and I think it will at least be understandable for everybody. We don't attack Putin or Moscow. We fight on our territory. We are defending our villages and cities. We don't have, enough weapon for this. That's why we don't use it anywhere. For us, that is the deficit. We can't spend it. And we didn't attack Putin. We leave it to tribunal.
Wednesday's purported strike is not the first time Moscow accused Kyiv of launching drones into territory it controls since Russian forces invaded Ukraine more than a year ago. Last week, the Russian-installed mayor of Sevastopol in Russian-occupied Crimea blamed a fire at a fuel depot on a Ukrainian drone strike. On Wednesday, smoke was seen billowing from another fire in the Crimean port of Krasnodar, which Russian authorities said was hit by a Ukrainian drone. Ukraine typically declines to claim responsibility for attacks on Russia or Russian-annexed Crimea, though Kyiv officials have frequently celebrated such attacks with cryptic or mocking remarks. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken on Wednesday said he cannot validate Russia's accusation that Ukraine tried to assassinate Putin in a drone attack, and added he would take anything coming from the Kremlin with a, quote, large shaker of salt.
In neighboring India, Goa is all set to host the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Foreign Ministers meeting on the 4th and the 5th of May. Indian External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar arrived in Goa to take stock of the preparation. EAM Jaishankar to have a bilateral meeting during the day with many of his SCO counterparts. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov arrived in Goa airport earlier today. The Russian counterpart is expected to have several bilateral with SCO countries apart from India. The group's meeting assumes significance as it is also taking place against the backdrop of rising tensions between Russia and Ukraine, especially following an apparent assassination attack on Russian President Vladimir Putin, which Russia has blamed on Ukrainians. Pakistan Foreign Minister Bilawal Bhutto Zardari also reached Goa for the SCO meeting in the afternoon on May 4th. However, possibility of a bilateral between India and Pakistan's foreign minister has not yet been confirmed so far. The Goa has decked up with Goan style to welcome SCO country members and delegates on the 4th and 5th of May. India took over the rotating presidency of SCO at the Smartland SCO Summit in 2022. This year, India is hosting several important SCO meetings, including the Foreign Ministers meeting in Goa from May 4th to 5th. This year, India is hosting several important SCO meetings, including the Foreign Ministers meeting in Goa from May 4th to 5th. India has sent formal invitations to all SCO members, and the Foreign Ministers of China, Pakistan and Russia have confirmed their participation in the meeting. On its foreign minister's visit to India, the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson said on Tuesday that at a meeting, Xinjiang will exchange views with other SCO member states' foreign ministers on the international and regional situation. At the meeting, State Councillor and Foreign Minister Xinjiang will exchange views with other SCO member states' foreign ministers on the international and regional situation and the SCO cooperation in various fields, among other topics, to make full preparation for this year's SCO summit. Myanmar's generals say that they have pardoned more than 2,000 political prisoners to mark Vesak, a major Buddhist holiday. The military said 2,153 people jailed for incitement would be released on humanitarian grounds, citing a statement signed by Military Council Secretary Lieutenant General Ong Ling Wei.
More than 2,000 prisoners were freed by Myanmar's military government on Wednesday, state media reported. Video from state television MRTV showed dozens of people leaving prisons. Among them, according to activists and media, a journalist and numerous political detainees. Since overthrowing an elected government in 2021, Myanmar's military has detained at least 17,000 opponents, according to the Assistance Association for Political Prisoners, the AAPP. They say about 3,500 have been killed by security forces. MRTV said the prisoners convicted of incitement were pardoned to mark a Buddhist holiday and were warned against reoffending. The AAPP say many of those released were already close to finishing their sentences. The military says it is fighting, quote, terrorists, but many of the junta's opponents were charged under a law prohibiting incitement, the definition of which has been expanded and used against people urging civil servants to go on strike. Among the most prominent political prisoners is ousted leader Aung San Suu Kyi, who is serving 33 years in prison for a multitude of offenses she says were trumped up.
A full dress rehearsal for the coronation ceremony of King Charles III took place in preparation for the actual event that's coming up on Saturday. Despite the notable missing guests, eager members of the public have already begun to camp out for the best views of an event that hasn't taken place since 1953.
With less than a week to go until King Charles III's coronation in London, a full dress rehearsal took place in the early hours of Wednesday morning, with many onlookers watching the procession. Thousands of soldiers marched from Buckingham Palace to Westminster Abbey, along with the Diamond State Jubilee coach set to carry the King on his coronation day. The more comfortable British royal coach, there has been much attention regarding the breaks in tradition other than the choice of coach, such as his attire for the ceremony and the ceremony itself being smaller, shorter and more diverse than his mother's coronation 70 years ago. The guest list too has garnered controversy. As a state occasion, the British government controls the guest list of around 2,000 people. The King's sons, Prince William and Prince Harry, will both be in attendance, although Prince Harry's wife, Meghan Markle, will not. Many key political figures have also been invited, such as the British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and former UK Prime Ministers such as Theresa May and Tony Blair. US President Joe Biden will not be attending himself, but has confirmed that First Lady Jill Biden will take his place. However, reports that the leaders of several nations such as Russia and Iran did not receive invitations as a result of their strained or suspended diplomatic relations with Britain. The festivities will last all weekend, running into Monday, which has been proclaimed a public holiday nationwide. Events include colourful parades, public concerts, spectacular light shows and thousands of street parties across the UK and the Commonwealth. The public will be able to watch the ceremony from sites prepared along the route, as well as screening sites in London's major parks. According to The Telegraph, more than 15 tents have already been set up by eager members of the public to get the best view. While critics have questioned the cost of the lavish coronation at a time when the public is facing economic hardship, a palace spokesperson pointed to reports that more than £1 billion, that's roughly $1.25 billion, was expected to flow into the struggling economy on the back of the event.
Some South Africans are calling for Britain to return the world's largest diamond, known as the Star of Africa, which is set in the royal scepter that King Charles III will hold at his coronation. The diamond, which weighs 530 carats, was discovered in South Africa in 1905 and presented to the British monarchy by the colonial government in the country, which was then under British rule. Now, amid a global conversation about returning artwork and artifacts that were pillaged during colonial times, some South Africans are calling for the diamond to be brought back. Officially known as Colonel I, the diamond in the scepter was cut from the Colonel diamond, a 3,100 carat stone that was mined near Pretoria. A smaller diamond cut from the same stone, known as Colonel II, is set in the imperial state crown, which is worn by British monarchs on ceremonial occasions. Along with the scepter, it is kept with the other crown jewels in the Tower of London. We'll be back with more world news after this short commercial break. Welcome back. The United Nations pressed Sudan's warring factions to guarantee safe passage of humanitarian aid after 6 trucks were looted and airstrike in the capital undermined a support truce. UN Aid Chief Martin Griffiths said he hoped to have face-to-face meetings with Sudan's warring parties within 2 to 3 days to secure guarantees from them for aid convoys to deliver received supplies.
It's a plea to help the helpless. Armed with a mission to find ways to bring relief to the millions of Sudanese unable to flee, the United Nations aid chief arrived in Port Sudan amidst the unrest for talks about providing humanitarian aid. He said he was seeking guarantees from both warring factions for the safe passage of staff and supplies.
We know that these general assurances need to be translated into specific commitments. And we have identified a range of very specific commitments which we would like to see discussed, agreed, committed to, and then implemented.
At the moment, many aid operations are suspended, and those running are having difficulty reaching those who need it. Worse still, 6 trucks bringing supplies to the country's western Darfur region had been looted en route. Even before the fighting erupted mid-April, a third of Sudan's population was heavily dependent on humanitarian aid, and current shortages of food, water and electricity have left families living on the brink. The UN Secretary-General has called for calm, urging the international community to put pressure on both sides of the conflict.
A country like Sudan that has suffered so much, that is in such a desperate economic and humanitarian situation, cannot afford a struggle for power between 2 people.
According to the UN, the conflict has displaced over 330,000 people inside Sudan, whilst tens of thousands have fled to neighbouring countries for refuge.
Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi has arrived in Syria and is expected to meet with President Bashar al-Assad in what Tehran has described as a sign of its strategic victory in regional affairs. Raisi landed in Damascus for a 2-day trip and received an official welcome to kick off the first state visit by an Iranian president to Syria in 13 years.
It's a message not just to the Middle East, but to the entire world. The 2 allies are back in business after a large economic and political delegation from Iran landed in Damascus on Wednesday, much to the delight of the Syrian president.
When the war against Syria started 12 years ago, Iran didn't hesitate to stand alongside Syria despite the threats. Iran unreservedly offered all its political and economic support and even shed blood for the country, which is the most valuable thing a person can provide to their fellow human.
While Arab governments have isolated Syria from regional politics, thousands of Iranian-backed fighters were sent from around the Middle East to support Assad's forces during the war. The two leaders now appear to be cementing a long-term partnership.
We hope that the agreements signed between the two countries, especially those in the fields of economics and commerce, where there is a good potential in both countries, are implemented. And implementation of these agreements can definitely help upgrade the level of bilateral relations.
But it's also a tactical move, as President Raisi may be banking on regional powers eventually aiding the war-torn country.
If the GCC countries in particular are willing to invest in and pay for Syria's reconstruction, in my view, Iranian companies will be very interested to take part in that as one way to resuscitate Iran's own economy in the face of very crippling US sanctions.
The visit hasn't gone unnoticed abroad. The United States warns that countries worldwide should be concerned about this deepening of ties.
Preparations are in full swing ahead of the Seoul-Tokyo summit this weekend. A range of issues will be addressed, with Japan's planned release of wastewater from its destroyed Fukushima nuclear power plant possibly included.
During their summit this weekend, the leaders of South Korea and Japan are likely to discuss trilateral cooperation with the United States on North Korea and supply chains, as well as possibly Tokyo's plan to release treated nuclear wastewater into the ocean. On Wednesday, National Security Advisor Cho Tae-yong met with his Japanese counterpart Takeo Akiba, who came to Seoul to prepare for Prime Minister Fumio Kishida's visit on Sunday. According to President Yoon Suk-yeol's office, the top security advisors agreed on the need to strengthen security cooperation with the US. They also attended an inaugural session of an economic security dialogue focusing on enhancing supply chain resiliency and energy security. The three countries' joint response to North Korea's growing nuclear capabilities and provocations, as well as various threats to economic stability and supply chains, are expected to be major discussion points during Yoon and Kishida's talks. Afterwards, the Japanese PM on Monday is set to meet with conglomerate leaders who represent South Korea's largest lobbies, according to industry sources. Their talks will focus on ways to expand bilateral exchanges in strategic sectors, including semiconductors, batteries, and electric vehicles. Also, according to a South Korean daily, Seoul and Tokyo may also address sensitive matters, including the latter's plan to discharge 1.3 million tons of treated wastewater from the Fukushima nuclear power plant in the summer. A diplomatic source told the Seoul Shinmun Daily that the issue may well be discussed as Kishida seeks endorsement to release the radioactive water. While the International Atomic Energy Agency has green-lighted the move, Japanese fishermen and civil activists, as well as surrounding countries, including South Korea, in the Pacific Islands and China, have protested against the move, as scientists and environmental activists warn of the possible impact on human and marine life, and question the credibility of Japan's safety reports. South Korea is part of an IAEA safety review task force on Japan's wastewater disposal plan. But given its proximity and the range of sensitive bilateral issues, Deputy Director of the National Security Office Kim Tae-ho said in March that a separate scientific probe should be conducted on a bilateral basis. Kishida's two-day visit to Seoul will mark the resumption of regular top-level visits, beginning with Yoon's trip to Tokyo in March. Yoon's March visit came after his administration's decision to compensate Korean victims of Japan's wartime forced labor without forcing contributions from Japanese firms.
We have some good news for you. An experimental Alzheimer's drug developed by Eli Lilly and Co. slowed cognitive decline by 35% in a late-stage trial, providing that experts say is the strongest evidence yet that removing sticky amyloid plaques from the brain benefits patients with the fatal disease.
Another Alzheimer's treatment could soon hit the market. An experimental drug developed by Eli Lilly slowed cognitive decline by 35% in a closely watched late-stage trial, the company said Wednesday. The medication, called donanemab, which was given monthly through an intravenous infusion, met all goals of the trial combating the brain-wasting disease. The chief science officer for the not-for-profit Alzheimer's Association called the results the strongest phase 3 data for an Alzheimer's treatment to date. Previously approved drugs, including one from Japan's Eisai and Biogen, were shown to be less effective at slowing the progression of the disease. Donanemab did cause brain swelling in some patients, which is a known side effect of drugs of this type, and there were deaths attributed to the condition. One outside researcher referred to this as risks that need to be considered. Lilly says it plans to file for traditional U.S. approval by the end of June, and with regulators from other countries shortly thereafter. It hasn't determined a price for the treatment. Over 6 million Americans are living with Alzheimer's, and the number is projected to rise to nearly 13 million by 2050, according to the Alzheimer's Association. Lilly's stock was up 5% in late morning trading after hitting an all-time high.
Welcome back. For more news, let's take you around the world in a minute. The inventor of a pair of grain surfing robots said they could revolutionize the monitoring of grains in storage and keep farm workers out of harm's way. The Crower robots include a larger mothership which surfs on the surface of a grain heap and a smaller T-shaped device it deploys that can burrow through grain bowls to ensure crops are stored more efficiently. Manchester City's Erling Haaland continued his incredible debut campaign in England as he broke the record for most goals in a single Premier League season when he struck his side second against West Ham United. Israeli forces killed 2 Palestinian gunmen who had shot dead a British Israeli mother and her 2 daughters in April in the occupied West Bank. A third militant who had aided the 2 gunmen were also killed in a raid. Flooding and landslides triggered by heavy rain have killed at least 136 people in Rwanda as rescuers hunted survivors trapped in homes. The governor of Rwanda's western province said the Sebeya River had burst its banks, adding that the soil was soaked with rainwater from days before. A jury will now decide whether British singer-songwriter Ed Sheeran ripped off Marvin Gaye's Let's Get It On after hearing closing arguments in a week-long copyright trial. Lawyers from Townsend's heirs argued their clients were not claiming to own basic musical elements, but the way in which they were uniquely combined. That is all from us here at World News Tonight. Join us again tomorrow as we keep you up to date with the latest from around the world. In case you miss any of the stories tonight, you can watch the whole program on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Derana English. And we finally visit a South London park where a coach was made available by Uber to let Londoners ride a bumpy ride like King Charles around the park. Good night.